Chapter 11. A Little Pain. Amy was so surprised when the first piece of furniture taken off the train in the morning was another pink and white couch. When Uncle Louis told her she could take it as her gift, she actually ran up to him and gave him a hug. "Oh, thank you," she said earnestly. "And please thank the professor," she pleaded, "if you know how to tell him things. You said he would send in more furniture, and I'm so happy there was another pink couch." Uncle Louis promised to thank the professor. He then asked all the children to help him unload the train again, only this time he wanted them to take the furniture into the store. Nancy told everyone where to put things and ran around quickly reorganizing the supplies as the furniture came in. Ripple, her cat, found a place on the highest shelf and watched, wide-eyed, at all the commotion. The Beach Boys found 2 more hammocks and wanted to take them right away. "What do you have to trade?" Nancy asked with her hands on her hips. "Nothing," Damien laughed, bare-chested and standing up to his full height, which was taller than anyone else. Tossing back his thick, blonde, messy hair, he grinned. "We are sleeping on the beach," he reminded her, "while the rest of you are building houses, so we need the hammocks." "Why aren't you building a house?" Nancy questioned, undeterred. "We don't need a house," Lima explained with a wide smile on his black face. "We just need hammocks, so we should get them. Then find something to trade." Lima's black eyes twinkled. "Like what? Do you want some sand?" he asked. Quiet, thin Milan walked over to stand next to Nancy. "Why don't you catch some fish?" he suggested. That takes too long," Damien complained. Uncle Louis had overheard the conversation as well and spoke up in his calm way. "If you want the hammocks, boys, you have to do some work to trade for them, just like everyone else. At least go to Mining Hill and dig up a few rocks. You never know, you might even discover the treasure." The shirtless lads mumbled something under their breath, dropped the hammocks, and took off for the lake. Kenzie had been waiting in line. "I'm going to go pick some apples," he called out. Being a farm worker, he was able to use the produce he harvested as fair trade. "Then I'll be back for that red chair," he said, pointing in its direction. Nancy noticed the chair he was looking at and set it aside for him. "And I'll see if the chickens have laid any eggs," Charlie nodded, his eyes on a tall wooden ladder. "I need that ladder." Nancy put the ladder beside the red chair. The boys ran out to get their produce. All of a sudden, there was a scream and then crying. Louis ran out. Odin had pushed Santa to the ground and was shouting at her. "Hey, what's going on?" Uncle Louis called out. "She took the bed yesterday," Odin yelled, his messy blonde hair hiding his face. "There's no way she can have the big table as well. That's just not fair. Not fair." "But there will be 5 girls in my house," Anna explained tearfully, wiping blood from her bleeding knee. "I traded a whole pail of apples for this. We need a big table and a big bed." "Just because you're building a mansion doesn't mean you should get everything." "Enough, enough," Uncle Louis said, helping Santa get up. He was dismayed to see that Santa was bleeding and gave her a big hug. "Odin, look what you've done to Santa," he pointed out angrily. "You pushed her down and she's bleeding. From now on, there will be no hitting or hurting anyone in this world, and that's a rule." "Then you'd better make everyone share," Odin said, frowning. "If you really like that table, I'll help you make one." "Exactly like this table?" Odin questioned. "Yes, we'll try our best," Uncle Louis promised, still holding Santa close. "But you'll need to find something to trade for the wood supplies." "Dumb deal," Odin grumbled as he tramped off toward the North Forest. Tina and Lily came running over. "Are you okay, Santa?" Tina cried out, seeing bloodstains on Santa's bright yellow flowered skirt. "Let's go to the outdoor top and we'll help you get clean." Giving Santa over to her caring friends, Uncle Louis went back to unload the building boards and glue from the train. He found the printouts of the mansion instructions. Santa returned, looking much happier, even though half her dress was dripping wet. The bloodstains were gone, and a bandage had been wrapped around her knee. Having unloaded the supplies, Uncle Louis called together all the girls who hoped to live in the mansion and led them to the glue gun depositor. Some of the boys joined them, eager to learn how the work would be done. The glue gun was just about as long as Uncle Louis was tall and much higher. It was mounted just outside the store. Uncle Louis borrowed a ladder from the store. He had to climb the ladder to turn it on. "Now we need to be very careful with this," he warned them while the glue gun heated up. "The tip will become extremely hot and can burn you. And you don't want the hot glue to drip on you either, or it will hurt. So we must treat this equipment with a lot of respect. He gave the children a demonstration on how to use the new instrument. There was a long table underneath the hot tip where the building boards could be arranged for gluing. Now, Georgia, he said, I'll get you to climb the ladder and push the glue stick from behind to keep it going through this machine. Santa, you can push the button that allows the glue to drip out. And Amy, you can help me position the boards. Everyone heard Uncle Louie's warnings, but not having ever experienced burns, they weren't overly concerned. As Amy and Uncle Louie lined up 3 boards on the table under the tip, Santa heaved with all her strength on the trigger. Up high, Georgia pushed the glue stick from behind, and a large drop of clear, hot plastic oozed out and fell on the first board below. Pulling the board toward him, Uncle Louie called out for the girls to do it again. Once they had 3 drops of hot glue, he motioned for Amy to lift the second board, and together they placed it on top and pressed down. This will give us a solid, strong beam for your house, he told her with a pleased smile. Zahir, Vahid, Kenzie, Milan, and Charlie came closer to watch. All went well until they tried to move the 3rd building board into position on top of the glue. The last drop had fallen close to Amy's end, and when she and Uncle Louie pressed down the boards, it squeezed out onto her hand. The glue was hot. Amy screamed and hastily pulled her hand away, but the glue remained attached. In a moment, Uncle Louie was by her side, peeling the mess away. Are you all right? He asked, anxiously. A large red mark stretched across the palm of her hand, and tears welled up in Amy's eyes. It hurts, she cried out. It stings. All the tidies crowded around to see what a burn looked like. Some expressed sympathy, and Uncle Louie hugged her close. Remembering that he had seen a bottle of burn remedy in the first aid kit that was kept in the store, Uncle Louie begged Zahir to find it. Zahir asked Nancy, who was still in the store making bread. Nancy knew where everything was. In a moment, the dark-haired lad came running back with a bottle of ointment and the rest of the kit, just in case it was needed. Uncle Louie squeezed some of the gel from the bottle straight onto Amy's palm and told her to gently cover the burn. The cool blue liquid soothed her pain. Thank you, she murmured gratefully. Just keep putting it on whenever you need it, Uncle Louie told her. We'll leave it here by the glue gun. I sure hope there won't be too many other injuries. He looked around all the other tinies. Take note, everyone, he said. This glue is hot, and it will burn your skin if it gets on you. Burns hurt. The other tinies nodded soberly. Uncle Louie told Amy to sit down and rest until her hand felt better. Fredo ambled over to lie close beside her. He put his head on her lap, and Amy patted him gratefully. Who wants to help with the boards? Uncle Louie asked. When all the guys volunteered, Uncle Louie decided everyone would take turns. One by one, they began making the reinforced beams as the tinies rotated positions, and Amy and Fredo watched. Zahir whistled catchy tunes as he worked, which kept everyone moving. Before dinner that evening, they constructed many of the beams and frames for the walls and roof of the new mansion. And now we need to get those pieces up the hill, Uncle Louie stated, looking up in its direction. The hill suddenly appeared 10 times bigger than it had before. Amy's hand was feeling better, and she wanted to help. With her uninjured hand, she and Georgia tried to pick up a beam. They were barely able to budge it. Everyone laughed. I'd say boys on the ends and girls in the middle, Zahir suggested, coming over to take Amy's end. Vahid took George's. With Zahir and Vahid helping, the beam was bearable, and the 4 youths started toward the hill. Charlie and Kenzie helped Santa and Lily carry another beam. Dia suddenly decided she needed to use the outhouse, so she was excused. Uncle Louie grabbed a couple of building boards with Milan's help, and they followed the others. Many single sticks would be needed to make the floor. It was a grueling trek up the hill with plenty of stops. Is there an easier way to do this? Zahir asked, once they had reached the top of the hill. Laying the beams on the ground, they all wiped the sweat off their faces. There must be, Uncle Louie grunted as he and Milan lowered their 2 sticks. This is all we'll do for today. Let's all try to think of a better way for tomorrow. Nancy rang the dinner bell. Hooray! Vahid called out. We need to get something to trade. You spent your day helping out the girls, so you've earned your dinner, Uncle Louie told him. Really? Charlie said in surprise. All the boys looked over eagerly. Yes. From now on, Uncle Louie stated firmly, if you spend your day helping out someone else, then that is a fair trade for all your meals and drinks. There was a loud hooray from the boys as they dashed off to the store. The girls looked up. Oh, what about us? Santa asked. You all helped each other, Uncle Louis smiled, so you've traded for your meals. Even me? Amy asked anxiously. I sat for most of the day. Uncle Louis chuckled. You were hurt on the job, and you stayed with the laborers, even carrying a big beam at the end. Go have your dinner. Chapter 12. No rules? Louis was very tired that night when all the kids went to bed. He hobbled to the cave entrance and looked around wearily just to ensure no one was watching. Opening a locked door with the key that he kept in his pocket, he entered his office, closed the door, and with a groan, sat down in his chair. They had made a great start on the mansion. Even though the house was for the girls, the boys who were helping were learning how to build their own. In one day, they had built the frames for the first floor and clamped many wooden building boards together to make several strong beams. It was now a question of how to get all those structures up the hill. Tapping the side button of the cell phone with his hand, Louis turned it on and swiped the screen. He Googled, how to get heavy objects up a hill. As usual, there were many items for sale, very big items that weren't suitable for a tiny dome world. Eventually, he found the image of a man pushing a cart with wheels. Ah, that's what I need, he thought. Wheels. I need wheels and a way to attach them to a frame. A few more distracting ideas caught his eye, things that he thought might be fun to create in the future. Bikes, skateboards, and go-karts. But first they had to build everyone a house. He clicked back on the home screen and chose the white dove messenger icon for a video call. The professor answered, and his kind face showed up on the screen. How are you doing, Louis? He asked. You've worked very hard today. Yes, Louis chuckled, rubbing his shoulders. Getting up and down that hill with those wooden building boards was quite tiring. I've Googled ways to make it easier and decided that we should build carts. If it's possible, could you please send us some wheels? Great idea, the professor replied, nodding. I can get wheels easily enough. Carts will certainly help. Thank you, Louis smiled gratefully. Should also mention an incident today between Odin and Santa. Odin is still pushing the other kids around, and today he pushed Santa so hard that she fell and cut her knee. I made a rule that there was to be no hitting or hurting anyone in paradise. The professor's eyes filled with alarm. Santa actually cut her knee? He exclaimed. Was she bleeding? Louis nodded. Yes, and in tears. Her friends helped her out, and she's fine now. I'm really sorry to hear that Odin is pushing the others, the professor said with great disappointment. I hoped that once you all had entered paradise, everyone would be too happy to hurt anyone else. Louis didn't reply, and the professor pondered the incident thoughtfully. Finally, he said, I know Odin's behavior is distressing, but I don't want there to be any rules in your new world. I'd rather you sit down and talk to Odin about why he wants to hurt people. Remember the 10 principles. Listen and show empathy. Maybe help Odin think of other options to express his negative feelings in less harmful ways. Rules are unnecessarily restrictive. I'm sure after a few more weeks his behavior will improve. Louis was surprised by the reply. No rules at all? He questioned. He knew that in the professor's world, rules abounded. Not even wash your hands before you eat, or come to school in the mornings, or you must learn how to swim? No rules, the professor insisted. Just explain why it's important to wash your hands and swim, and then they will want to do it because they will see the benefits. Encourage them to come to school because learning is so exciting and valuable. You've done a great job so far, choosing only topics that are useful and important for them to know. Carry on in the same manner, and you'll never have to make a rule. Louis agreed. Well then, I suppose I could take time off building tomorrow to talk to Odin, he considered. Maybe he'll also have something to trade for table supplies, and I can help him make one of his own. Yes, the professor smiled. Let him express his feelings to you. A little empathy and encouragement should curtail Odin's desire to hurt others, just like we discussed in our course. Louis nodded. He understood that listening, empathy, and encouragement were important motivators. However, Louis was also aware that knowing how something is done or should be done doesn't always result in perfect implementation. Only 3 boys had learned how to swim, and he himself was still struggling to figure it out. Inwardly, the professor wished he could call Rachel Khalid for advice. He and Evan had excelled in making a perfect physical world in which the tinies could thrive, but they had never been parents. He thought to himself, it might be helpful sometimes to have a motherly perspective. Maybe Rachel would understand Odin. Oh, if only we didn't have to worry about making her an accomplice. Well, good night, son, the professor said kindly. You're doing a wonderful job with all these children, and for the most part, they all seem to be very happy. Thank you, Louis smiled, and good night to you. Once the screen went black, Louis thought about what he would say to Odin in the morning. Mentally, he went through the 10 principles checklist, taking note of all that he thought would apply. Listening, empathy, healing awareness, persuasion, foresight, and building community. Once he had made a plan, he Googled a few ideas for the boys' farmhouse. Yesterday, he had pulled Charlie's name from the jar. Charlie, Kenzie, and Vahid weren't so concerned with how nice their house looked, so Louis found a plan with a large veranda, 2 floors, and plenty of rooms. He sent it off to the professor to print. He received a text back from the professor. Do you hear that beautiful song? Louis couldn't hear anything in the cave. He had assumed all the kids were sound asleep. Turning off the lights in his cave office, he dashed outside. Someone was singing, and Louis knew immediately who it was. The clear, strong voice with the lovely, sweet tone was unmistakably Amy's.
I love you, Professor. You make my dreams come true. I couldn't ask for more. I'm so thankful to you. My favorite color, pink, is on the couch you gave. You know just what I think.
All of a sudden, the song stopped. Oh, I always get stuck on the last line, Amy moaned. What rhymes with gave? Louis could hear her trying various words. Finally, she found a word she liked. Wave!
My love to you, I wave.
And with that, Amy started the whole song over. With a smile, Louis locked the door to the cave office, rolled the fake rock in front, and headed to bed. He didn't know until the next day that the professor had sent another message that said, I can't tell you how much this little girl's songs mean to me. All the work we put into building paradise is worth it for just one song. I wish I could tell her how much I love her. Please take special care of her. See if there are any children who also love music and would like to make some easy instruments. I will send in some instructions. Early the next morning, everyone gathered at the store to get Nancy's fresh bread for breakfast. The farmers and the orchard girls had fruit, flowers, and veggies to trade. Charlie had even brought some eggs. Whistling happily, Zahir came in with his catch. He and Vahid had caught 10 fish. Amy had offered to help Nancy get breakfast ready that morning, since her hand had healed well and she was able to use it again. Taking one look at the stiff creatures with the blank eyes, she was aghast, especially when Zahir suggested that she fry the fish. She cried out, Oh, but that's so mean. I couldn't fry something alive. Uncle Louis came over just as Vahid walked in. They aren't alive, Amy, he assured her. Professor gave us fish to eat. That is why they are in the lake. They are meant for food. Putting an arm around Zahir's dejected shoulders, Uncle Louis asked Nancy for one of the small kitchen knives and a chopping board. She passed them to him. We'll be right back, Uncle Louis smiled, as he coaxed Zahir and Vahid outside with the fish. Frying the eggs, Amy kept busy while Nancy and Milan served the fruit and the bread. Almost everyone had eaten breakfast before Uncle Louis and the boys reappeared. Can you fry these? Zahir asked hopefully. On the chopping board were several long white slabs. They didn't have faces or skin, and there were no longer any eyes. Reluctantly, Amy took the chopping board from Zahir and Vahid. Uncle Louis was nodding at her. Yes, she agreed, I can fry these. She popped them into her pan with some oil, and in a few minutes they were done. She had to admit they smelled delicious. The 2 fishermen were still standing by the counter when Amy came back with the golden fillets on a tray. With pleased expressions, they helped themselves to the fish and some bread. Any chance you might have a lemon? Zahir asked eagerly. Nancy reached for a lemon in one of the fruit baskets she kept in the kitchen. What will you do with this? She asked. They are very sour. With a smile, Zahir picked up a small clean knife and cut the lemon open. I don't really know if I'm right, he confessed, squeezing the lemon juice on his fish, but I just have a feeling this might go well together. The girls looked at one another in surprise. What do I smell cooking? Lima asked as he came into the store. Fried fish, Zahir smiled, trying a forkful of the fish on his plate. Yum, he exclaimed with a smile in Amy's direction. This is the best breakfast ever. Amy felt proud, even though her part had been rather small. Vahid tasted the fish and his eyes lit up. Can we just eat breakfast now and bring double trays for lunch? Lima asked. But that's what you said yesterday, Nancy reminded him, and then you brought a cup of sand, which no one needs. Head out to Mining Hill, Uncle Louis told the Beach Boys firmly, tired of their reluctance to put in any effort. There are lots of treasure to be found in the dirt. At the very least, bring some flat rocks, and then you can have your breakfast. As the Beach Boys turned to leave, grumbling under their breath, Uncle Louis came forward to try a piece of the fried fish. He squeezed the other half of the lemon on his fillet and tried his first mouthful. This is fantastic, he raved, looking up at Zahir and Vahid. I sure hope you boys plan to fish every day. Zahir nodded eagerly. Sure will, he said. Odin brushed by, and Uncle Louis asked if he'd found anything to trade for table supplies. Not yet, Odin shrugged. The Beach Boys returned with only a few pebbles, so Uncle Louis told them to get their bread and fish and head down to the lake for a discussion. Standing up, Uncle Louis announced to the whole group, Everyone else will need to meet me here at the store for school today. I'll ring the bell when it's time to come. If you're no longer using your little wooden bed, bring it over to the glue gun. We will use the old beds to make carts today. I want everyone to help make a cart to carry materials for the houses. Singling out Franz, Damien, Lima, Odin, and Ponzi, Uncle Louis insisted they follow him to the beach. Reluctantly, they complied, while the other kids enjoyed some time to play outside. Sprawling out in the sand, the 5 boys made themselves comfortable. Are we in trouble again? Damien asked, looking up warily with his big brown eyes. No, not in trouble, Uncle Louis replied, but I believe it's important for us all to talk about how we treat other people and build our community. We are very fortunate to live in paradise, and we want to keep this world happy for everyone and free from pain and suffering. This means we need to think of how to make this world a happier place for others as well as ourselves. But what about when they cause us pain? Odin demanded, his pale blue eyes flashing indignantly. How does that happen? Uncle Louis asked him. Well, sometimes we really want something and then someone else comes along and takes it. That hurts me. Uncle Louis looked up at Odin with surprise. Anger and frustration were seething in the boy's face. It was hard to believe that in a beautiful world, a 10.5-month-old tiny could have such strong negative emotions. All right, Uncle Louis replied, exercising empathy. You were very upset when Santa got the bed and the table. I can understand your disappointment. You didn't think that was fair. It sure wasn't fair, Odin grumbled. All I got was a hard chair. Did you have to do anything or trade anything to get that chair? No, Odin retorted, but Santa got the bed for nothing. He tried to help Odin think of options. Can you trade for a bed? Or make a bed? But that's work. Santa didn't have to work for the bed. Uncle Louis looked at Odin long and hard, but the stocky youth was not about to change his grumpy appearance. What options do we have when someone takes something that we had our heart set on? What can we do? Fight him and get it back, Odin insisted. Anything else? Ponzi looked up at Uncle Louis. Tell you and hope you make them give it back? That's a less aggressive way, Uncle Louis nodded. We could make something that they will like better and offer to trade, Damien suggested with a smile. I like that idea, Uncle Louis agreed. Now you're talking about making an effort to do something that will keep the other person happy, and you will feel happy yourself. You could just decide not to care about the thing, whatever it is, Lima shrugged. You could let them have it and make yourself something instead. Yes, Uncle Louis nodded, less convinced. That works well if you care more about the other person than yourself. Then you will be happy if they are happy. But if you continue feeling resentful towards that person, your unhappiness may lead to hurtful actions later. But what if you make the other person something and then they don't want it? Franz challenged. That is a possibility, Uncle Louis agreed. I say just hit him and grab it, Odin grunted. What is gained by hurting people? They won't say no the next time. Uncle Louis looked at Odin thoughtfully. Is that really what you want, Odin? Do you want to make the others so afraid of you here in paradise that they just give you whatever you ask for? Do you think you'll have any good friendships if people are afraid of you? I don't need friends, Odin shrugged. Hey, Ponzi frowned. Other than Ponzi, Odin clarified. We all need friends, Uncle Louis told him. We make friends when we show kindness to others. We lose friends when we resort to scaring people to get our own way. No one feels happy when they are hurt, and no one who hurts others will feel happy inside. So let's have no more hurting, no hurtful words, no hurtful actions. In paradise, we will use other methods to work through conflicts. Come and talk to me if you can't figure out what to do. I don't like rules, Odin complained. I'm not making rules, Uncle Louis replied reluctantly. I'm only giving suggestions. The professor doesn't want us to have rules in paradise. With a smug smile, Odin stated, That's more like it. As he watched Odin trudge off alone across the meadow while the others ran ahead, Uncle Louis wasn't sure the discussion had been profitable. Just don't understand the way Odin thinks, he thought to himself. How will I be able to empathize and help someone that I really don't understand? Chapter 13. Danger and Heroes. The train came in while Uncle Louis was chatting to the boys on the beach. Those who were still near the store ran to unload the goods. A new shipment of insects was in the first cart, and all the girls squealed with delight when they saw the colorful butterflies flutter out. Amy and Georgia tried to catch them, but the butterflies stayed just out of their reach. Vahid and Kenzie began to unload the other train cars, and then they discovered wheels. Lots of wheels. Leaving the side doors open, they pulled them out to have some fun. They were thrilled to discover how fast the wheels could roll, shoving them back and forth to each other. Then Kenzie suggested a small incline. By the time Uncle Louis had finished his chat with the boys, a full-blown competition was taking place. Walking back to the store, Uncle Louis could see 7 children at the top of Mining Hill, holding something in their hands. 8 others were merrily chasing after round discs that were speeding quickly down the hill and bouncing in all directions. It's all wonderful experimentation, Uncle Louis smiled, just like the professor was hoping to see. Then he saw a wheel fly up into the air almost as high as Lily was tall. Oh dear, he thought, someone could get hurt if those wheels hit them. As quickly as he could, Uncle Louis put an end to the wheel chase, encouraging everyone to come and make carts. Fascinated by the wheels, even Odin, Ponzi, and the Beach Boys were eager to begin. All the wheels had a little rod inserted through the middle, which stuck out on each side. Uncle Louis showed them how to use a sharp tool to bore a hole through the building boards and then attach them to the rods. The other ends of the boards became handles. Using the glue gun, he created a frame and attached it to the handles. Then he laid one of the small wooden beds inside and dabbed more hot glue on it to make it strong. Damien followed the instructions to a point, but he didn't want to use a wooden bed. Instead, he laid down a layer of wooden boards across the frame, creating a much wider cart than any of the others. Testing it out, he proved his wider cart helped to keep the beams from tipping side to side. "This is no effort at all," Damien exclaimed, pushing his new contraption up the hill with 2 beams laid across it. "I really like your idea," Uncle Louis praised, watching him carry the beams with ease. "I think I'll redesign my cart. Yours is better." Once Uncle Louis began making changes, most of the boys did the same. The girls were content to keep the smaller carts. When they had finished, Uncle Louis excused Nancy and Milan to make lunch at the store. Georgia, Tina, and Vahid were asked to work on musical instruments, since instructions had arrived that morning along with the wheels. All the other children agreed to push the building materials up the hill. It was still hard work, but not nearly as taxing, although Zahir and Vahid weren't as energetic as they had been the day before. Rosa and Lily, however, were exhausted after only pushing their cart halfway up the hill, and they let everyone know. "I need to use the outhouse, Rosa whined at the top of the hill. Me too, Lily complained. That's fine, girls, Uncle Louis said, rather tired of all their complaining. As he emptied his widened cart for the second time, pulling out 2 beams, he suggested, use the outhouse, and then maybe you can help Nancy and Milan get the food ready. Rosa and Lily were delighted to escape the difficult work. Once the outhouse trip was completed, they decided to stall even longer. We could go to the store the long way around, Lily giggled. With a frown, Rosa questioned uncertainly, You mean walk all the way around Cascading Mountain? We'll just take it slowly, Lily assured her. Maybe we can find some pretty flowers to pick. But we already worked for our lunch, right? Rosa asked, confused. Oh, yes, Lily smiled mischievously. We're just going to do a little extra and bring flowers as well. Oh, I get it, Rosa laughed. Let's go. The girls set off happily, quite hidden from view in the forested area between the 2 hills. They found purple clover in a grassy clearing. Rabbits like this, Lily told Rosa, and so do the bees. They startled the 2 deer that spent most of their time in the forest and almost caught a little rabbit, but it popped down a hole just in time. Oh, look at this trail, Lily said, stopping in her tracks. I wonder where it leads. Rosa was eager to investigate, so the 2 of them followed it. It stops at this rock, Rosa said, puzzled. That's strange, Lily remarked. Why would anyone come to this rock and stop here? They poked around in the bushes but found nothing. Lily suggested they walk down beside the rock and try to imagine why anyone would walk along the path. After some sitting and thinking, neither one of them could figure it out. Rosa's stomach growled. It must be nearly lunchtime, she said. We should get to the store. Lily agreed. Let's go, she said, rising up from the rock. By the time the 2 girls came around Cascading Mountain and began heading toward the store, Nancy was ringing the bell for lunch. Carrying some of the purple clover, Lily tasted one of the tiny strands from the flower blossom and discovered it was sweet. Oh, you should try this, she exclaimed, handing a piece to Rosa. Rosa reached out to receive the tiny strand when suddenly they both walked into a soft, sticky, almost invisible net between 2 trees. Had they been watching where they were going, they may have seen the silvery threads sparkling in the sunlight, but they had been too distracted by the edible flower. What is this? Rosa called out, pulling at the threads that were tangled in her pretty blonde curls. Oh, it's all over me. It's sticking to my hair. It's on my face. Get it off. It's on me too, Lily wailed. Yuck, yuck, get it off. As the girls struggled to take off the sticky substance, Rosa looked up and screamed at the top of her voice. Lily looked up and began hollering as well. Above them and dropping down fast was a large, scary black creature they had never seen before. It was over half their size and had 8 long, wriggling legs and a round body with a peculiar red shape underneath. Even its eyes were terribly strange. It didn't just have 2 beady eyes, it had many. In no time at all, the thin black legs were wrapping them up with its never-ending sticky threads that they couldn't break or push away. Every time the creature came around in front of them, the terrifying mouth with fangs seemed to come closer and closer. The girls screamed and hollered. Who is screaming? A voice hollered back. What is wrong with you girls? Another voice demanded. The girls had never been so relieved to hear Odin and Pansy. Help us, they pleaded. Look, they're all tangled up, Pansy exclaimed to Odin, pointing in the girls' direction. Odin was looking above the girls' heads. What is that black thing? He yelled. For a moment, the boys stood aghast, hardly believing what they were seeing. Uncle Louis had never told them about strange black animals with 8 wriggly legs. Please help us, Lily called out desperately. Save us, Rosa begged. Odin and Pansy swung into action. I'll find some sticks, Pansy yelled, dashing around the trees, hoping some broken branches might be on the ground. Undeterred by his lack of weapons, stocky Odin advanced with his arms ready for action and his pale blue eyes fixed firmly on the fascinating black creature. It's tying you up, he marveled. Rosa wailed, Yes, please help! Flailing his arms wildly and yelling at the top of his voice, Odin tried to scare the strange animal, and it reacted with fear. Nimbly wriggling up along one of its threads, the creature moved out of Odin's reach. It was too high to tie any more threads around the girls or frighten them with its protruding fangs. Continuing his antics, Odin's long blonde hair whipped wildly around him. He managed to keep the strange animal away from the girls until Ponce returned with 2 building boards he had found lying nearby. Then the boys courageously took on the beast. Jumping, poking, and yelling fiercely at the creature, they tried to knock it down from its perch. Unable to move their arms, but craning their necks to see, the horrified girls watched the fight, fearful of what would happen to the boys should the aggressive creature fall to the ground and turn on them. At last, the boys succeeded in knocking it down. On the defensive now, the creature rose terrifyingly to its full height, which was well past their waists, and began to charge at them. Odin struck it with a mighty blow. Ponce whacked it a second time, and it collapsed. Then Odin jumped on the back of the strange animal, and there was a crackly crunch. It was not pleasant to see all the liquid oozing out of the body, but the wiggly legs finally stopped moving. The girls cheered. The boys were dumbfounded for a moment, still positioned and ready for another attack. But the black beast didn't move. At last, the boys decided they had won the battle. "We'll get you out of there," Ponce promised the girls, but it was harder than he thought. Bravely, he pulled at the threads with his board, but they wouldn't break. "We're going to need something to cut with," Odin determined. "Hey, girls," he said brusquely, "we're going to run back and get carts and something sharp. If we can't cut you out of those wraps, we'll wheel you to the store and see what Uncle Louis can do." "Okay," Rosa said gratefully, her big eyes shining with adoration. "Thank you for saving us." "Yes," Lily agreed in much the same fashion. "You guys will be our heroes forever." Odin and Ponce looked at each other in surprise. They had no idea how to respond to praise. Without another word, they ran off toward the store. It took a while for the boys to return. Uncle Louis came with them, carrying one of the small kitchen knives in his hand. As he sawed away at the sticky threads surrounding the girls, Odin and Ponce examined the unmoving creature more carefully, poking it with their boards to see if it would react. But nothing happened. Having never caught a fish or seen Zahir prepare the fillets, they and most of the tinies were unfamiliar with death. "What's wrong with it?" Ponce murmured to himself, confusion all over his dark bronze face. "Why doesn't it move anymore?" "That was terrible, Uncle Louis," Rosa lamented, trembling all over as he pulled off the sticky threads from her round arms. "What was that creature? Why didn't you ever tell us about him?" "It was a spider," Uncle Louis told her. "I don't know how it got into paradise. Maybe it climbed onto the train by mistake." "But why didn't you tell us about him?" Lily begged anxiously, pulling threads from her straight brown hair. "There are many things I haven't told you about," Uncle Louis replied. "Why would I tell you about something so scary when I didn't think you'd ever see one?" Curiously, Odin looked up. His pale blue eyes were filled with intrigue. "Are there more creatures that we don't know about?" he asked. "Is there another world somewhere?" "Yes," Uncle Louis admitted uncomfortably, "there are and there is. But paradise is the world which the professor has built for us. It's the only world in which we can survive." "Can you tell us about the other world?" Ponce begged. "Perhaps at some point," Uncle Louis conceded, "once you've learned all there is to know about paradise." The boys grumbled and complained, but Uncle Louis would not divulge any further information. After freeing the girls from the web, Uncle Louis came over to examine the stiff black creature with Odin and Ponce. He pushed it gently a couple of times and poked at the liquid pooling around it. Standing up straight, he spoke heavily. "It's dead. It's not breathing." He sighed deeply. "It's no longer alive." "Dead?" Odin asked curiously. "What does that mean?" Uncle Louis looked at him in a serious way. "Once something is dead," he said slowly, "it will never live again. That's the end of its opportunity to be alive. You killed it." "Oh, good." Odin smiled, looking very pleased with himself. "Well, if we ever see another one of these," he stated boldly, "we'll certainly know what to do with it." "You are both so brave," Lily praised, with a sweet smile on her little freckled face. The boys looked at each other uncomfortably. Odin turned and began running to the store. But Ponce nodded in Lily's direction. "Thank you," he said, his dark eyes meeting hers for one brief second, and then he too ran off. With the girls clinging tightly to his arms, Uncle Louis walked with them to get lunch. At the store. There he told everyone what had happened and praised Odin and Ponzi for their courageous actions. When lunch was over and the girls had run off with their friends, Uncle Louis slipped away to the cave office. The first thing he did was Google black spiders. When he found an image of a spider with a red blotch on its abdomen, he was shocked to read the details. Breathing deeply, Uncle Louis wrote a hurried text message to the professor explaining the incident, the results of his search, and a suggestion that the dangerous beast might have entered paradise on the train. He praised Odin and Ponzi, who had saved the girls from the poisonous black widow spider, and suggested there be some special recognition for the heroes. Feeling rather shaken, he left the cave only to encounter another dilemma. Kenzie met him as he walked past the outhouses, and he was visibly upset. Zahir and Vahid can't leave the outhouse, he relayed anxiously. It's just really gross. Running into the outhouse, Uncle Louis encountered two listless, vomiting boys. It took a while before they had emptied their stomachs and could be helped into bed. It was finally determined that they hadn't washed their hands with soap after filleting the fish that morning, but had simply rinsed them under the water. Professor Lemans was extremely distraught when he and Louis made contact later that evening for the daily debriefing. He knew how dangerous a black widow was to the tinies, and he was very alarmed that a creature from his world had found its way into the dome. Allures! This must have been absolutely frightening for those poor girls, he commiserated. It was terribly frightening, Louis agreed. But, on the bright side, Odin and Ponzi became heroes today. Their aggressive natures were exactly what was needed. Jacques Lemans pondered Louis' remarks. Interesting, he mused. They did save the day, and not everyone would react with such courage. They do need to be praised for their actions. However, we don't want this to ever happen again. I'll investigate how that spider may have found its way in on the train, he promised. This is very, very distressing. And then to have Zahir and Vahid so sick after handling raw fish, all on the same day. I had hoped bacterial infections would not occur in your world. I thought we had been extra cautious to avoid this happening. You must encourage everyone to always wash their hands with soap before a meal, he told Louis. But don't make a rule, Louis clarified. No rules, just strongly encourage them all, the professor insisted. Whether there was a rule or no rule, there were now two tinies who would never forget to wash their hands before a meal. Suffering such a terrible reaction had firmly impressed upon them that there were very important reasons for some of the things that Uncle Louis encouraged them to do. Chapter 14. Preparations. Uncle Louis smiled sadly. I'm sorry, Amy. I can't stay in your house because that would be unfair to the others. You could take turns staying with all of us, she suggested hopefully. Are you afraid to be on your own? He asked, looking up at the big building board mansion that many of the tinies had helped the girls construct. 8 weeks had passed quickly. All the houses were now built and no one slept on the store deck anymore. I'm not terribly afraid, she murmured, coming closer to Uncle Louis and putting her arm around him. I know Odin and Ponzi are always guarding us, but I just feel better when you are close by. Uncle Louis smiled and gave Amy a hug. Now over 6 centimeters tall, Amy was a slim, pretty girl who was becoming a strong, positive leader. He was rather amused by her trust in Odin and Ponzi. The heroes had been praised numerous times and now spent much of their day in the North Forest near the train tracks, guarding paradise. Louis knew the train was carefully inspected every day before entering paradise. He didn't expect any more frightening creatures would ever have the opportunity to ransack their world. But the whole ordeal had elevated Odin and Ponzi in everyone's eyes and given them a story to tell, over and over. I must stay near the store, Uncle Louis explained. I need to be somewhere central so that anyone can find me quickly. Paradise is a very safe place, and you have a house full of girls and 2 boys nearby. Okay, she sighed, leaning her head on his shoulder. I guess I'll be okay." "You will be," he assured with a gentle squeeze. "And if you ever call out for me, I'll come running." Amy smiled up at him gratefully. As they approached the clearing at the top of Rainbow Hill, they saw the new row of solar twinkle lights that had been strung along the trees. "Are you getting ready for the celebration tonight?" he asked. The children were 12 months old and maturing rapidly. Uncle Louis had told everyone a thank you celebration was in order to show their appreciation to the mastermind of paradise. He assured them that he had a special way of telling the professor and Evan to watch the show. "It's going to be amazing," Amy smiled, looking up at him with delight. "Georgia has added a very special ending to our song. She made little shakers, and Vinitha painted them. And Vahid has these metal things that make a loud clang when he hits them together. I'm sure the professor and Evan will love our song." "I'm sure they will too," Uncle Louis smiled. "This is going to be a very special celebration." "Oh, and this is the best part," Amy added enthusiastically, as she pulled away and clapped her hands. "Zahir has agreed to sing with me." "You talked him into it?" "Yes," she nodded exuberantly, her blue eyes sparkling. "Finally! Zahir doesn't think he has a good voice, but he does. Except," she added, "when his voice cracks. But hopefully that won't happen tonight." "Well done, Amy," Uncle Louis praised happily. "I'm really looking forward to the performance and hearing the two of you sing." Looking down toward the lake, he murmured, "I need to go and see if the surfers are ready." Uncle Louis turned away to head down to the beach. Amy met Zahir to practice her song. Everyone had a role to play in the celebration, and there were even going to be 2 special awards given out, which Uncle Louis was keeping secret. Leaving the school pavilion, the elder Tiny crossed the bridge over Rainy River. Zahir had named it such, as it only flowed when it rained in paradise. Looking out at the lake, Uncle Louis sighed. Damien, Franz, and Lima were supposed to be doing a surfing show for the celebration, but at the moment they were in the water throwing an apple back and forth. While many of the youths had built houses and learned to make, grow, or find something to barter with in the store, the beach boys had strung their hammocks in the trees and learned to build surfboards, but only for themselves. That was all they had worked on during the entire 8 weeks they had spent in paradise. Unfortunately, the beach boys still rarely had anything to trade. Recently, they had begun sneaking food supplies from Nancy, who had no way of stopping them. Seeing the apple that they were tossing around, Uncle Louis guessed they had taken it from the orchards lining the beach. Since they never contributed to any of the work on the farm, it didn't seem fair for them to help themselves to the produce. Uncle Louis had been trying to convince the professor that some rules and consequences were needed in paradise. As of last night, the professor had agreed that if the boys stole from the store again, it would be helpful to impose a consequence. "Hey guys," Uncle Louis called out, "are you ready for the show tonight?" "I can stand up on my board, Louis," Franz replied. "Want to see?" "I would," Uncle Louis told him, choosing to ignore the fact that Franz had shortened his name. If there were to be no rules in paradise, he could hardly insist on respectful titles. "I'd like to see what all of you are planning to do for the celebration," he encouraged. With a little grumbling about their game being interrupted, the boys grabbed their surfboards off the beach and headed out into the waves. They lay on top of the boards and paddled out to where the whitecaps were forming. Uncle Louis watched patiently as the boys struggled time and again to get up on the boards. Damien was the strongest and most agile, although Lima wasn't far behind. After several tries, Damien was the first to stand for several seconds, riding a wave. Then he was tossed headfirst into the water. "Well done!" Uncle Louis clapped. He watched until each boy had stood up on his board for at least a few seconds. He admired their proficiency in the water and wished that more of the tinies had learned to swim. But it hadn't been a popular activity. "Perhaps I didn't teach it very well," he reflected, as Damien swam hard towards the bigger waves. "It's difficult to be enthusiastic and build their confidence in something that still intimidates me." Finally, he called the boys in. "You're doing very well on those boards," Uncle Louis told them with a big smile, "and I love watching you swim." The boys looked proudly at each other. "Yes, I wish all of us could swim like you do," he nodded. "You've got it down pat. A little more surfing practice this afternoon will help you to do even better tonight. It would be great to aim for 10 seconds each on those boards." "Easy," Damien boasted. Lima considered the request dubiously. "How about 5?" Franz offered. See what you can do, Uncle Louis encouraged. Now, before I go, we also need to discuss trading. Franz frowned. What do we need to trade for? There's enough food for everyone in the store. With a smile, Uncle Louis reminded him, we trade because it keeps everyone productive and learning new skills. There are plenty of fish in this lake you boys could catch. Anyone can catch fish if they want them, Lima argued, his dark arms folded against his bare chest. It takes 2 minutes, if that. Yeah, Damien agreed. Zahir fishes every morning. If anyone else wants fish, they can come get them. We don't mind. The professor would like you to contribute in some way, Uncle Louis said kindly. You could make surfboards for other people, or try to make boats. I've heard that boats are easier to use on the water. That's a lot of work, Damien complained with his hands on his hips. It took us days to make these surfboards. No one else even wants to learn how to swim, so who would want a board? Well, if none of these suggestions are appealing to you, Uncle Louis told them, then you can always go to Mining Hill and see what treasures you can find. Some would like rocks for the gardens or gems and pebbles for decorations. You're welcome to dig up anything and bring it to the store for trade. Oh, that's too hard, Franz whined. The gentle negotiating didn't seem to be making any headway. Okay, from now on, Uncle Louis said firmly, if you steal food or supplies, you will be banned from the lake until you make or bring something to trade. Lima laughed. Will someone stand there all day and night guarding the lake? For a moment, Uncle Louis imagined himself building a wall, a tall, thick wall, all around the lake with a big, locked gate. Folding his arms across his chest, Uncle Louis reminded himself that a tall, thick wall wouldn't fit with the professor's desire for paradise to be a happy, free place. With a sigh, he remembered the lofty principles of servant leadership. Persuasion, he told himself. Try a little more persuasion. Guys, Uncle Louis pleaded, have a look at the wonderful world we are living in. Do you think we would have such a delightful paradise if Evan and the professor just laid around, played with their friends, and only thought about their own interests? Lima shrugged. Well, we wouldn't, Uncle Louis said, answering his own question. The professor and Evan worked very hard to make paradise for us. They want us to do our part to make it more beautiful, to learn, and to help each other. Are we their slaves? Damien questioned. No, he retorted. We are all working together to keep our paradise the best that it can be. And then what? Lima questioned. Uncle Louis looked at him with confusion, unsure of what he meant. Damien understood. He shrugged and explained. Not everyone cares about the way things look. Glancing over at his friends, he added, We don't. The friends agreed. Paradise looks good enough already, Franz put in. Why can't we just enjoy it and have fun? Because without our effort, paradise won't function as well as it can, Uncle Louis explained. He tried to think of ways to help the boys understand. Imagine if no one planted food in the gardens or made sure the plants were well watered. What if no one took the produce to the store and Nancy and Milan didn't turn it into a delicious meal? What would you eat? We'd pick our own apples, Lima argued. Yawning, Damien stated, I'd be fine with Wonder Drink. Me too, Franz chimed in. With a skeptical expression, Uncle Louis looked long and hard at the boys. Lima and Damien couldn't help but smile. They knew they weren't being entirely truthful. Franz looked away. Well, Uncle Louis told them, the professor and Evan gave years of their lives to make this world. All they ask is that we do our part to keep it attractive and self-sustaining. That's how we show our gratitude to them. I don't know who the professor is, Franz argued. Then with a twinkle in his brown eyes, he added, or even if he really exists. The other boys laughed. Uncle Louis shook his head in disappointment. But, Lima admitted, we do know Evan. Yeah, Evan was nice, Damien agreed half-heartedly. We should at least be thankful to him. I've had enough of this, Franz complained. Let's go practice our surfing. And with that, he ran into the water. The other boys followed. Watching them run off, Uncle Louis wondered how he could help these boys understand the importance of gratitude and working together for the benefit of the whole group. The majority of the Tinies loved the bartering system and enjoyed discovering new treasures they could take to the store. Thankfulness towards Professor and Evan for the daily trainloads of goods and the magnificent world was something many of the children related to quite naturally. Walking back over the dry, rainy river channel and through the orchards which were loaded down with fruit, Uncle Louis saw that Santa and Charlie were harvesting the cherry crop. Santa was happily humming away to herself as she worked. A lot of the fruit had been pecked by the birds, but the kids were carefully choosing the most intact berries. Maxie lay nearby, watching intently for rabbits. "Hey, Uncle Louis," Charlie called out, "should we put the best cherries in a basket to bring to the celebration tonight? Would Evan and the professor like that?" "Sure," Uncle Louis nodded, very pleased by Charlie's suggestion. "That's a great idea." "But how will the professor see the cherries?" Santa asked, looking very confused. "How will he know they are there?" For a moment, Uncle Louis wasn't sure how to answer the question. He knew he couldn't tell her the technical details. "Well," he began slowly, "the professor and I have a special connection. If I tell him to look at something, then he will." "But how does he see us?" Santa asked, looking up at the sky. "He just can when he wants to," Uncle Louis shrugged. "Will we see him?" Charlie asked. "No, you can't see him," Uncle Louis answered, "but trust me, the professor can see us if he wants to, and so can Evan. I can't tell you any more than that." It was easy to see that Santa had other questions, but she accepted his reply with a little shrug of her dark shoulders. "It's too bad we can't send them a couple of mangoes," Charlie said thoughtfully. "But they aren't quite ready yet." "No, they're still hard as rocks," Santa laughed, "and besides, there are only 7. Uncle Louis glanced over at the mango trees. They had certainly not been as productive as all the others. "We'll send them a gift of cherries on the train tomorrow," Uncle Louis told her. "Then they'll get to enjoy them just like we do." "Oh, that's a good idea," Santa laughed, wiggling her hips and clapping her hands together. "We'll pick the best cherries for them." Chapter 15. The Celebration. A message scrolled across Evan's screen. "Check out these model homes." He was finishing off an assignment in the Biosphere Library when his dad's email came to his attention. "There are only 5 houses left for sale. You'd be a 10-minute walk away from us, and Serenity Street backs onto a 30-acre green space." However, it was not the opportunity to purchase a house in the coveted area near his parents', but the model homes themselves, which drew Evan wide-eyed to examine the link more closely. On the website, the large display of miniature model homes lining a fabricated street set Evan's imagination on fire. He'd never seen model homes quite like these. Hinge fronts lifted up to reveal perfectly crafted rooms with open windows, stairs, decorated rooms, and flooring, everything that made a home attractive and livable. "Are they big enough for the tinies?" he wondered with astonishment. Even if they were, he told himself, tinies have wooden homes which they enjoyed building themselves. There is no need for something so extravagant. No need at all. However, he couldn't resist forwarding the link to the professor with a little message. "Think they'd fit if they were for sale?" A voice from behind startled him. "Hey, do you want to go out for a coffee or hot chocolate?" Evan looked up from his computer to see Jim standing nearby with a hopeful expression. They had been friends since the first year of university. As the monkeys chattered away nearby, competing with the noisy Molly macaw, Evan replied, "Sorry, buddy, I have an important meeting with Professor Lemans." Disappointed, Jim replied, "You've had enough meetings to plan a world takeover." "We're still working on that research project," Evan explained, closing the lid of his computer and standing up. He put his arm around his friend's shoulders. "Look, I'd love to get together with you and have a catch-up soon, maybe next week." "It's always next week," his friend grumbled as they walked out of the library and passed the sloth hanging lazily from a tree. Curiously, Jim asked, "When are you going to tell everyone about this project?" "Possibly in less than a year from now," Evan smiled, trying to speak above the noise of the howler monkeys. "It's going well. We just have a few more things to work out. You'll be one of the first to know, I'm sure." Jim asked him to repeat himself as the monkeys took a short reprieve from the chorus. "I hope it's soon," Jim nodded. "Rumor has it that you're building a virtual reality interactive 3D jungle world. That would be so cool." Evan smiled. "It would," he agreed, as they stopped by the main glass doors. Tall, high, and tinted blue, the doors framed the young deciduous forest lining the winding pathway outside. The remaining red, orange, and yellow leaves were blowing off the trees and whirling around. A dark storm was blowing in. Opening the door for his friend, Evan thanked him for stopping by. "See ya," Jim called out as he exited the building. Crisp, cool autumn air enveloped Evan as he waved goodbye and closed the door. Then he quickly dashed down the hall to meet the professor. The thank you celebration was beginning in 5 minutes, and he didn't want to miss a thing. As always, when he turned the corner and came to Muir Hall, he looked in all directions to be sure no one was watching. Usually by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the biosphere was closed to the university students, and only Tim, the maintenance man, remained behind. However, a student was still wandering through the rainforest exhibits, so Evan waited, checking his messages as a cover for standing still. There was a message from his parents wondering if he'd seen the email they had sent about the houses for sale. He replied, yes. After answering his parents, Evan also took the opportunity to catch up with some students who had started a group chat about investigating the breeding possibilities between black bears and polar bears in the Arctic biome. This would provide a good opportunity for genetic research, Evan texted in agreement. "We're safe," a voice chuckled. With a start, Evan looked up. Professor Lemans was standing beside him, and the student had disappeared. Quickly pressing the green arrow on his cell phone, Evan and the professor were immediately lowered into the tunnel shaft. "How was your day, Professor?" "Good enough until the last hour." "What happened?" "You know that red-headed kid in first year?" "You mean Seth McGeorge?" "You do know him?" "I tutor him, sir." "Well, I suppose you know he's a creationist?" "I do." "So he's always questioning everything I say about the evolution of man and how life began. Today he wanted to know why I didn't believe in a god." "And what did you say?" "I gave him many reasons, mostly from the scientific viewpoint and the research that has been done. But wouldn't you know it, he didn't seem moved by anything I said. Finally, I asked if he'd read my book, and he hadn't." With a chuckle, he added, "So I insisted he read it before he asked any more questions." Passing by the empty nursery rooms, Evan felt somewhat emboldened by Seth's questioning. "If you don't mind me asking," he said, "why is it that you don't see any evidence of intelligent design?" Professor looked surprised. "Are you on Seth's side?" Evan shook his head and sighed. I just wonder, that's all. I like to keep an open mind." "Well, I'll give you one simple explanation," the professor replied. "There can't be a god, or he wouldn't allow so many senseless tragedies to take place on Earth. Think about it, Evan. Think about how much we care for paradise. We'd do anything to keep our tiny safe. We don't want to lose even one. We would never willingly generate tidal waves to wipe them all out or introduce disease." For a moment the professor paused, reflecting on the mishaps that had occurred. "We have had a few close calls in paradise," he admitted, "but certainly nothing we would instigate. If there is a God, then how can he allow so much suffering? How can he be paying any attention to what is going on in the earth?" "True," Evan agreed timidly, "but most of the time the world functions incredibly well." "All it takes is one catastrophe, and that's enough to prove that God can't exist," the professor argued. "If he is really all-powerful, why would he allow any hurricanes, or volcanoes, or tsunamis, or massive flooding, or famine, or—" "I guess so," Evan nodded uncertainly. "If there is a supernatural God with power, then he should be able to stop those things from happening. If he wanted to." The professor glanced over with a frown. His voice was almost fierce. "And why wouldn't he want to?" "I don't know," Evan faltered, "but unless suffering has a purpose, maybe some good comes from it." Having sensed on a few occasions a personal vendetta in the professor's rants, Evan looked over compassionately. "Sir, you seem to have experienced some suffering in your own life." The professor didn't answer, but Evan noticed his clenched fists and the dark, brooding look in his brown eyes. As they entered the office, the conversation didn't continue. It was time for the celebration to begin. It was only about 5:30 in the afternoon, but due to the approaching storm outside, it was fairly dark in the Paradise Room. They drew close to the dome. "Ooh la la, look what they've done with the solar lights we sent in," Professor Lemans whispered, very impressed. The beach area had been lit up with twinkle lights. Strung in trees that lined the beach, the reflection of the lights shimmered in the water. While the professor and Evan had been in class, Louis and his team of tinies had woven the 2 meters of lights and cable in and out of the trees. They had created a lighted pathway up Rainbow Hill and encircled the plateau clearing where the festivities were to take place. The on and off switch was positioned close to the clearing. "Paradise looks beautiful tonight," Evan said quietly. "I love the lights." "I sent in new clothes and glow sticks as well," the professor told him with a smile. Evan chuckled. He knew how much the professor enjoyed sending in gifts. "And look at those swim shorts," the professor whispered, pointing to the Beach Boys. "I had them custom made." The Beach Boys were leaning on their surfboards, clad only in their new shorts, which were entirely free of ribbons and fringes. Waiting impatiently for the signal to begin the show, their voices were clearly discernible from the speakers that hung on the wall. "I don't see why we have to wait so long," Damien was saying. "Yeah, let's get on with the show," France muttered. "I don't see anyone watching us from above," Lima chuckled, flinging out one long black arm. "I think Uncle Louis is telling us stories. He's just trying to motivate us to do something that he wants us to do." Franz laughed. "Why do you still call him Uncle? I just call him Louis." Damien was thinking about Lehman's comment, and he agreed. "A mastermind sounds kind of scary and powerful," he pondered. "Maybe it is just a story." "Come on, let's get on with the show," Lima said impatiently. "I think the whole professor thing is just made up," France snickered. The professor and Evan shared a look of amusement. "Maybe," Damien pondered. "We did used to see Big Evan in the nursery, but I've never seen any professor." Looking over at Evan with a twinkle in his eyes, the professor whispered, "I should just get up on my lift pod right now and look in through the top." He chuckled. "Then they'd know." Evan grinned. Can you imagine their reaction? A smile crept across the professor's face as he thought through the whole scenario, even though he had no intentions of carrying it out. "It would alter the experiment significantly," he mused. "If they knew they were being watched, they wouldn't feel free to be themselves. They would feel stressed." Evan nodded. "Or they might stay indoors all day where they couldn't be seen." Franz was still complaining. "Yeah, whatever happened to Evan?" he grumbled. "Why don't we see or hear from him anymore? He used to check on us every day." Evan smiled sadly, wishing he could still interact. Then he noticed movement in the meadow. "Look," he whispered. "There's action by the schoolhouse." Suddenly 4 children ran out from the school waving colored glow sticks and shouting, "Thank you for paradise!" Together they sang a cute, brand new song, while Georgia and Kenzie kept the beat with their newly made shakers and cymbals. The children repeated their happy song while the Beach Boys rode the waves, managing to stay on their boards for an average of 9 seconds each. The professor laughed and clapped softly. Evan took pictures, although in the dim lighting he was having trouble capturing good ones. "The Beach Boys are learning to surf," the professor whispered. "I'm glad to see they are developing their skills." The tinies on the shoreline held their glow sticks high and began running towards Rainbow Hill. Looking in that direction, the professor noticed a sudden glow of color lighting up the clearing. On that high edge of the hill, the rest of the children could now be seen standing in a colorful heart shape with their lighted glow sticks. Amy and Zahir were in the middle. "I love it," the professor said out loud. Evan looked at him sideways, wondering if his voice would be heard. At that moment, Amy began to sing from the hilltop. Her voice rang out clearly across the water. Moving around the dome to a place where they could view the singers more clearly, the professor and Evan eagerly leaned forward. Tall and slim, Amy looked lovely in the new shimmering white fairy petal dress that was only slightly too big. It had long iridescent gauze ribbons that hung from her waist and shoulders. Dark and handsome, Zahir stood near her, looking quite dapper in his flowing white shirt, ribbon-trimmed vest, and new suspender shorts. Fredo sat close by. They had tied a few red and pink ribbons around the dog's neck. A white ribbon had also been used to pull back Zahir's hair. The boys always had a good supply of ribbons they had torn off their clothes. Having found a low-light setting on his phone, Evan managed to capture a great picture of the scene. He turned on his video.
"Thank you, thank you, thank you,"
were the first lines of the song. Amy sang softly, looking up to the sky with outreached arms. With a sideways glance, Evan could see a smile spreading across the professor's face. Zahir stepped forward and repeated the lyrics with the same earnest tone. Evan had never heard Zahir sing before. "Wow, he has a good voice," he whispered. Quite a well-matched pair, the professor agreed proudly. Privately, he had high hopes that their relationship would blossom in the future.
We thank you for all that you do,
they both sang together.
We love the flowers and the fruit from the seeds we sow.
A sudden, uncomfortable thought flitted across Evan's mind. This is almost like worship, he thought to himself.
We thank you for stocking our store,
Zahir added, his voice cracking a little. With only a slight hesitation and glance in Amy's direction, he sang,
Every day the train brings more. Professor, you've given us everything.
Zahir praised, kneeling down to embrace his favorite dog, for whom he was very thankful.
We're so happy here that we want to sing.
The professor coughed softly. Evan turned and saw there were tears in his eyes. Continuing to record the scene on his phone, he put his free arm around the older man's shoulders.
So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Amy softly ended the pretty song. In even softer tones, Zahir echoed,
So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Then together with Louis, everyone on the mountain raised their arms and said, We love you! Thank you for paradise! Unexpectedly, the professor turned to Evan, choked up with emotion. He couldn't say anything. Hey, it's all been worth it, Evan told him, patting him on the back, and not really knowing what to say or do. He thought to himself, Do believe objectivity may have just come to an end. Clearing his throat, Evan said, Never mind the doubting Beach Boys. You've got a very thankful group of tinies who love you. It took some time for the professor to gain his composure. He stood by the dome, leaning against the glass, unable to talk. Together they watched Uncle Louis present the special awards he had sent in for the unsuspecting heroes. Calling Odin and Ponzi to stand before all the others, Uncle Louis reflected on the brave response of the two boys in the face of danger. Here in paradise, he continued, we rarely see danger or have to save one another. So today we celebrate our two heroes who did just that and fought the frightening, dangerous spider which trapped Rosa and Lily. We admire your courage and your willingness to help your fellow tinies. Thank you, Ponzi and Odin. Everyone cheered and clapped. The epic tale had been told so many times that it was now remembered as the most exciting event in the history of paradise. Ponzi and Odin stood tall, receiving the praise and applause as proper heroes. Their eyes lit up when Uncle Louis brought forward two dark blue flags with golden writing. In big letters on each flag was the word, courage. From outside the dome, Evan nodded with a smile. It's so good to see those boys being rewarded for their bravery. Without a word, the professor agreed. He was still emotional. Watching the boys admire their flags, Evan saw Rosa and Lily come over to give them hugs. He remarked, I believe the spider battle was a turning point for those two. A little praise and recognition for their courage may be just what they needed. Again, the professor nodded. Inside, the farmers involved in growing produce handed out fruit and vegetables to the others. Those who had been mining in the hills gave out pretty colored beads they had found. Nancy and Milan, the bread makers, doled out buns. Even the Beach Boys contributed by handing everyone a paper invitation to come for a surfing lesson. It wasn't until the feasting had ended and Louis was organizing a group game of Storm the Lantern on Rainbow Hill that the professor was able to get himself together. That was magnifique, he said quietly. It was very impressive, Evan whispered. It topped any award I've ever received, the professor confided. Really? Even Scientist of the Year? Even that. This had something that all the others lacked. What was that? That song came from their hearts, he said emotionally. It was real. It was beautiful. Struggling to find words to express his feelings, he just shook his head and looked at his phone. There was another reason he felt emotional, but he wasn't quite ready to share it. In a quiet voice, he said, It's nearly 7. We better get home. You need your dinner. Evan laughed softly. Why don't we go out and celebrate with some Chinese food? Thanks for the offer, the professor nodded. I just feel drained. I need to go home. Patting his mentor on the back, Evan whispered, Congratulations, Professor Lemans. Go home and remember all the thankful hearts that praised you tonight." Nodding, the professor smiled. "I will," he promised, opening the door to the tunnel that led out to the parking lot. "Do you mind if I stay here a little longer and watch the game?" Evan inquired. No, go ahead. I'll see you in the morning." Evan stayed for another hour, watching the tinies play their games. He wished he could join in. As he watched the youths hide in various places in the forest and two boys sneak up the hill hoping to touch the glow stick before Uncle Louis noticed them, he pondered the professor's emotional response to the captivating celebration. Both of them had given up everything to work on this project. They had lost friendships and used up limited resources. Still in his late 20s, Evan hoped that one day, when he'd completed his doctorate, he might get to enjoy closer relationships once again. Maybe he'd find a wife and have a family. Maybe he'd even buy a house near his parents. But, he considered, Professor has no one. He's in his 50s. Why is he all alone? Why is he giving his whole life to this? Evan sighed, feeling another twinge of conscience. "I sure hope we've done the right thing," he mused, as the worship song niggled at his conscience. "I feel like we're playing God. This is sort of our world that we've created, but in reality, we haven't created anything. We've only manipulated life." Noticing the Beach Boys wandering back to the lake, Evan listened to their voices, which were always well reflected off the surface of the water. "That game was cool," Franz admitted. "And I got a stash of buns," Lima bragged. "Should keep us going for the next couple days." Franz opened his bag to show the others and laughed. "And I got some cherries." Damien popped his hand in to grab a few cherries, eating them straight away. "Yum," he said. Franz quickly closed the bag up. Passing by the mango trees, Damien sniffed one of the ripening fruits. "I'm keeping my eyes and nose on these mangoes," he remarked mischievously. "They smell awesome." "You might have to catch 20 fish for one of those," Lima taunted. Even though there were 5 mango trees in the orchard, none had produced more than 2 fruits. "Charlie is guarding them like they are the most precious thing in the orchard." Damien laughed. Franz suddenly changed the subject. "That celebration tonight was dumb," he quipped. "No one was listening." "There were some strange sounds," Damien reflected. "I heard muffled noises." "I didn't hear anything," Franz retorted as they reached their hammocks. He pushed his long, stringy hair out of his eyes. "This hair is driving me crazy." Shaking back his lengthy golden waves, Damien agreed. "Mine too." "Glad that I don't have that problem," Lima laughed, rubbing a tight afro. Climbing into his hammock, he added, "But you know, Zahir also said he heard funny noises. Maybe the animals were reacting to all the lights and songs. They aren't used to them." "I hope they turn those lights off soon," Franz complained. "It's way too bright to sleep." "I'm turning them off," Damien declared. "I know where the switch is." And with that, he dashed up the path which led up Rainbow Hill. Evan on the other side of the glass took mental note. "We certainly can be heard on this side," he said to himself, pulling out his phone to text. "I'll have to let the professor know. And I should ask him if he has ordered those tiny scissors. Those boys really do need haircuts."